So we continue with 1 John 4, and we continue with the theme of love, God expressing love through the sacrifice of Jesus and loving one another and remaining in God and in God's love. So, in this, remember, anytime you encounter that, we have to look backwards and forwards, see which it is. In this we know that we are remaining in him and he in us. How? Because. So it's obviously going to be looking forward this time. So how do we know that we remain in him and he in us? We've already been told the answer to that at the end of chapter 3, but now we're getting it again. Because he has given perfect of didomi, therefore not only did he give it in the past, but we now are in possession of it, because he has given to us, now notice, of or from his Spirit. Well, hasn't he given us his Spirit? Yes, he's given us his Spirit, but we have only a partial experience of the fullness of God, and so that's probably what the ek. He's given us an experience of the Spirit. It's not that he hasn't given us the whole Spirit. It's just that that doesn't impart to us the fullness of all that God is. It's the amount that we presently can experience of God. Again, we have a situation where this probably means the Spirit of him, that is, his Spirit. But it could be interpreted as from the Spirit itself, because the grammar works out both ways, but probably it should be his Spirit. So how do we know that we remain in God and God remains in us? That's something communicated by God's Spirit. God lives in us by the Spirit. And we have seen, or maybe even gazed upon, that's how we translated it in chapter 1, and we have seen and we are testifying. This is reminding us very much of chapter 1. John talked about how we touched, we saw, we heard, we gazed at, we handled, and now we are bearing witness so that you can have the same experience. So this we probably is referring back again to the apostolic experience. We have seen and we are bearing witness that, now we're going to get the same thing we got a couple of verses ago. The Father sent the Son as, we saw this last screen, he sent him as a halasmos. Here he sends him as a sotera. He sends him to be a sotera. In Greek, you can just say he sent him a sotera. Doesn't mean he sent a sotera to him. It means he sent him to be that. He sent him a savior of the world. Again, here's a real obvious example of where you have a noun that implies an action. The implied action in the word savior is to save the world. So this is what's called an objective genitive. The action implied here has this as its object. He sent him to save the world. He sent him as the savior of the world. Those within the Christian community have already experienced that salvation. Those outside the community are also among those for whom Christ died. In several places in 1 John, he has some very clear statements that the atonement is not limited to some predetermined or pre-elected minority, but rather is for the sake of the whole world. Whoever, you can read this on as if it were an on, whoever confesses that, now we're going to come back to the confession. Whoever confesses, now again, this time it's not going to be confesses Jesus Christ having come in the flesh. This time it's the other side. Confesses Jesus as God's Son. So the Christology that John endorses has two sides. He truly is God's Son, but he truly became a human. Whoever confesses, we'll come back to that, God remains in him and he remains in God. So by the Spirit, we know that we are mutually abiding in God and he in us. But who are those people in whom God abides and who abide in God? Well, it's the ones who have the correct confession of Jesus. Now, elsewhere, he's also going to say it's those who keep his commandments, it's those who love one another. So there isn't like one criteria that determines all of it. But this is the important point he wants to make here. Those that confess that. Now, typically, people have translated it like this, that Jesus is the Son of God. That assumes Jesus is the subject, is, and now we have the predicate nominative, the complement. It's making a statement about Jesus. Jesus is the Son of God. But if you remember the previous screen where we had God is love, there's a rule about how this works. If two parts, both of them have definite articles, but one of them loses it, remember, we would normally say ha Jesus. So Jesus is either the subject or the complement, and Son of God is either subject or complement. So if one of them loses its article and is positioned in front of the to be verb, we should read that one as the complement. If we follow that rule, this sentence does not say, whoever confesses that Jesus is the Son of God. It actually says the opposite. Whoever confesses that the Son of God, subject, is Jesus. It answers a different question. The traditional way of reading it is, who is Jesus? Answer, well, he's the Son of God. This way of reading it turns that around. So, who's the Son of God? I mean, Zeus is purported to have lots of sons and daughters. The emperor is called Son of God. Like, lots of people are claiming Son of God. But who's really the Son of God? It's Jesus. It's making a statement about this by identifying it as this. The difference isn't huge, but it's addressing a different problem. The problem that's addressed, if we think this is the subject, is a low Christology. And John is trying to fix that by saying, no, he's more than just a human. He's the Son of God. The problem to be solved, if we make this the subject, is that people don't know who the Son of God is. They have all sorts of ideas or multiple claims. And we're saying, no, it's not those. It's Jesus. This combats pluralism, not a low Christology. So that's a question. How do we translate it? Some people would say, well, yeah, it's a name. It's not quite the same as God is love, love is God. I think the rule still applies. Now, hardly anybody has ever claimed that. It has been claimed, but prominently, recently, N.T. Wright has come out claiming that that's the correct way to read both this sentence and the one in the Gospel of John that says the same thing. These things are written that you might believe that the Christ, the Son of God, is Jesus. I think that that way of reading it is much more consistent with the purpose of John's Gospel to show that the Word really did become flesh in the person of Jesus, and that that's the person who fulfills all these other roles. It's starting with the question, who's going to do this? Jesus will. So N.T. Wright is at least on my side in agreeing with the way I think this ought to be read. There are a few more. May their tribe increase, because I think it's the right way to read it. If you confess that the Son of God is Jesus, God remains in him and he in God. And we have known, that's a perfect from ginosko, and we have believed, that's the perfect of pistuo. Notice both of them have the augment or the reduplication actually, and the ka. And we have known and we have believed the love. We believe in this love. We've accepted this love. We've known this love. Okay? We've known the love which God has in us, among us, brought into our experience. So this is the relative pronoun going with love. We have come to know this love. We've come to experience this love. God is love, exactly the same expression as before, again, with dropping the article and positioning it right before the to be verb. God is love, and this person, the one remaining in love, does this, remains in God, and God remains in him. So the grammar of that sentence is not particularly difficult. The two perfect tenses, otherwise it's all present tense. And we have come to know, and we have come to believe, so that we now know and we now believe God's love. The love which God has for us, among us. God is love, and the one remaining in love remains in God, and God remains in him. 17. In this, again, backwards or forwards. In this, love has been perfected. We've seen that a few times. With us, probably not much different than en, he, min, among us, in our situation, within the community. This is how love is perfected within the community, namely when this happens. So again, we're going to be looking forward. Here is how love gets perfected among us. If we have, no, so that we have, that's a purpose subjunctive, in order that, so that we have parrhesia, third time already that he's talked about this courage that we have, so that we have courage, parrhesia, in the day of judgment. That's from Chrysis, third declension noun. On the judgment day, we're not afraid when the judgment day comes because we belong to God. And that's how love is perfected. Love doesn't have to fear these things, doesn't worry about being shamed, is what we read about in chapter 2. So, we have confidence in the day of judgment because just as that one is now going to be referred back to Jesus. It's no longer the love of God, but the one we referred to before we referred to God. That was Jesus. Because just as that one is, also we are in this world. We live in this world the way that one does. Interestingly, it doesn't say the way he did. The way Jesus is in the world. Presumably, though, it still means the way he manifested his earthly life when he was living visibly present in this world. We live like Jesus did. Fear not is in love. Fear isn't in love. In English, we'd probably just say, there isn't fear in love. In love isn't fear, is no fear. But, on the contrary, love with this adjective, teleia. We've seen the verb teleao, to reach perfection, to be perfected. This is now the adjective, perfect love. Love that reaches its goal. The telos is always the goal. But perfect love, notice the verb, cast or throws out. We've usually encountered it as this verb, to throw out. But you can just as well do it to throw out, throw outside. Perfect love throws out fear. So, when love is perfected, fear disappears. You don't fear if you're perfect in love. Doesn't mean we don't fear. It just means that when we do, the solution is to learn love better, to absorb the love of God, recognize what God's love did for us, express that love in our relationships with one another, thus abiding in God, God abiding in us. And that's how the fear is taken care of. Perfect love drives out, throws out fear. And this is a bit of a difficult phrase to understand, because fear has kolasin. The word means torment or agony or something like that. And usually people interpret it something like, because fear has to do with. It concerns. Fear pays attention to this. Fear has this in mind. Okay? So when we focus on that, we're going to fear. If we're worried about the punishment that we might face, of course we're going to be fearful. But perfect love drives out the fear because we don't have to worry about that punishment. Fear has to do with punishment, but we don't face that prospect. Therefore, we have confidence. The fearing one, remember, phobeomai is deponent, so the one who fears, translated actively, the one who fears has not been perfected. Same word as that. This is the adjective perfect. This is the verb teleo. Oh, look at that. You can see the whole word right there. Reduplication, ending directly on the stem. Passive verb. The fearing person hasn't been perfected in love. Not yet. Love will one day also be perfected, so the fear is ultimately dealt with. John tends to speak in these extreme terms. Either you fear or you don't. You either love or you don't. Perfect love is like this, but by saying it that way, he's acknowledging that we have love. We just don't have it quite perfected yet, and so we still struggle with fear, and perfect love is that which is going to drive it out. Remember the earlier part, he said, if our hearts condemn us, God is greater than our hearts. He'll deal with that yet too. We don't have to rely only on our subjective feeling of whether or not we're still afraid to discern what the outcome is that awaits us.